Hey, I thought it was about time to make a video, so here we are. I've had a little idea that could get me started because I needed an initial idea to kind of get started with the channel. So I'm going to do a little series now where I'm going to find interesting Stack Overflow questions, and then I'm going to solve them. Hopefully, I get some good feedback from the person that answered the question, and then I'll share with you how I approach that, kind of line by line, my logic, my thought process. And then, yeah, would love to also hear what you think of the questions, what you think of the answers. And, let me know if you think of a different way or a better way we could solve it. And I'm very open to, people posting Stack Overflow questions down below in the comments, and I'll try to answer them, and, then we can review them and see, how we did. I think initially I'm going to kind of focus on JavaScript and SVG with this video series, maybe some D3GS. And the video today will be on a question that was posted on Stack Overflow that I answered with just vanilla JavaScript. So let's get into it. Let's get into the code. So here's the final answer. It's basically just an SVG here, described by this path with three kind of straight sides and one curved side. When you type in the box here, the transition happens. When you click outside the box, the transition goes the opposite direction. I also have a couple of buttons that I just used at the start for testing, but the original question that was posted on Stack Overflow asked how to trigger this transition from this shape to a straight shape, and so both SVGs were given and were described in the question, but the original poster of the question didn't know how to animate that, between the 2 points, between the two states. He wanted it to happen on this kind of onFocus and offFocus, or onFocus and blur events. The question was actually asked and was kind of given in a React Native code, but I've never used React Native, so I just made a simple sandbox environment here on CodePen, just with normal HTML, SVG elements and vanilla JavaScript, nothing more, nothing less. So let's look at how it's working, how I approached it. So a path element in SVGs describes with this kind of string, this D string, how the shape is constructed. And so actually the path here, the original path is here on the screen. And so it means M00 means start at the point 00 here, top left. And the important thing to note about SVGs is that they have a top left origin. X-axis goes left to right, increasing. Y-axis goes top to bottom, increasing. So positive Y is down, positive X is right. Slightly different from the normal coordinate system we're used to. We have to keep that in mind when we're thinking about all of these things. So the path goes from 0, 0. It then goes vertically 200 in the positive direction. So it goes from here to here. So still at X0, but at Y200. Then it has this Q point, which is the center of a curve, which I'll come back to in a second. Then it goes to 400, 120. So 400 is the full width of the SVG, and 120 is up here, so a little bit above this point. And then it goes vertically back to 0. So vertically it goes to the top. And then Z just means finish the path, so go in a straight line back to the first point. Now back to this Q point in the middle. If we go on the Mozilla website and look at SVGs and look at paths, you can see there's a number of ways to describe paths with these different letters. So there's more advanced stuff using C curves or cubic curves, but we can also do Q curves, which is quadratic curves. So actually a little bit simpler. That's why I use them. And so here you just have to specify the start point, the end point, and then the midpoint. So where where does that curve have its kind of like it's sort of like a center of an arc. It's not exactly a center of an arc. It's kind of where the two tangents meet. But you get the idea. And so with this, as you move this center point around, you can change whether the arc is symmetrical or not, and so on. And so here, this is symmetrical. It goes from 1080 to 180, so from there to there. And in the middle, at 95, which is halfway in the middle, and 10, so up here. That's our kind of center point. Or it's called a control point actually here. And so with that, that's how we've defined this. And so just going to put in now opacity 1 on a couple of elements here. So we have a circle down here which is at that point 370, and then 2 lines connecting that point here and that point here. If I go through our animation again, you can see that's how it's actually happening in the JavaScript. So we're essentially just pulling this center point, or this control point, so to say, from here up to here so that it's flat, and we're also pulling this point down so that it's on the same level as this. So I'll do it again, once there, once back. I can also add in here some helpers to show. Essentially, initially we have this curve here, and then obviously the rest of the sides. At a point later, then we're, we might be, from here we've gone down a little bit, and the center point's also coming in, so we're like here, and then closer to the end, we're closer down here to this point here at 200, or 400, 200, and then, we're much shallower now, and then finally we just become flat when we have that control point on somewhere on the line, then it's a straight line. So that's quite a nice way, a simple way. We just move this control point from over here back. So I'm going to set this to 0 now because it's not as pretty. And I'm going to go through the code. So first of all, we set up the width. That was just something that the original poster had used, and so I tried not to deviate too much from the initial code setup that they had. Then we just grabbed the SVG with the query selector. There's only one SVG here, so it's quite a simple example. We also set the width of the SVG just in case. We also set it explicitly, so we don't really need to. And then I just make that a little bit bigger. I then set up 3 arrays which describe the state before. So the state before is this curved state. So you see here that's that center point at 395, 370. The state at the end, which for example for that center point is 180, 200. So the most important number here is the 200 because that means it's on the line. So that means it's flat, it's not a curve anymore. And the 180 means it's slightly over to the left, just because I figured out that makes a kind of nice soft animation. Then you'll see that vertical 200 both times. So we're at the vertical 200 point here, moving away from the 0, point. So all of that stays the same. And so you see then here that the difference array, which is essentially just, how much do we have between the after and before array, how much do we need to move or translate. So those we don't need to move at all, that we don't need to move at all. This one we need to move quite a lot, as I said. So we need to ultimately end up taking away 215 from the X and 170 from the Y. And then we have the next point, which is this point over here. And so this one actually does move down so that it's flat with this point over here. So it doesn't move anything in the width, it doesn't move anything in the X direction, but we do have to add on 80 in the Y direction. So that's 80 in the positive direction, so we're going here more down the page, so more positive Y. And the last point up here at vertical 0 doesn't change. And so essentially here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this difference and use a fraction of it as we move from the before state to the after state, and that's how I'm going to animate the transition. I also console log out what that looks like, the before state, just to show. So it's basically that description, that D path that we have over here. And then we just need to get the target element, which is this target path, the mint colored path. Get the circle, get the line 1 and the line 2. So the circle is down here and the line 1 and the line 2. And then this just sets the target value to what we just calculated, the string over here, but it was already explicitly typed as that anyway. And then we have the current, which is just set again to the before state, because we're going to start in that state. And then we have a function here that's going to get called by some set interval. So firing the function every so many milliseconds. And essentially the I here is between 0 and 100. So it's just how far we are in our transition away from the start position, the before position, or at the after position, the end position, the final position, and somewhere in between that. So that's going to get called several times as we go from 0 to 100, and that's how we're going to animate the transition. I'll show you what the commented out code looked like first, because it's a bit clearer, and then I set up like a more compact way of writing it, but it's actually not as clear. So essentially we just need to update the number values, so like these ones here, these ones here, these ones here, these ones here, and these ones here. The text values are going to stay the same. And so we just, you know, target that current first element and then 0 element of that array. So that's this one. And then this one would be 1, 1. This one would be 2, 3. This would be index 3. And 0, because it's just one element, just a single element in that array. 4, 5, so 5, 0 and 5, 1. 6, 7, so 7, 0 and 7, 1. 8, 9, so 9, 0. So you see, I didn't even bother to do the 9 because it's always the same. We're always going back to that 0 point, but I could have done it if I wanted to. But the most important stuff is that we're changing all of this stuff in here, and so they're just lined up. So current 50 equals before 50 plus round to 0 decimal places, I divided by 100. So our percentage across our transition times the difference in the same index. So 50, 50, 50. Every line it's lined up, right? So you just incrementing across that transition. Then we set the D value of that, of our target path, the mint colored path here, to that array, split with, made into a text and split with a space in between it, so that it's valid, a valid string to go into the D path. And then we just set the center X and center Y point of the circle. So the Q is just the circle here, or that Q value in the middle. L1 and L2, we have to set the X1, Y1, X2, Y2 of all of them, just to make that transition smooth. But actually, once we have the full working example without it doing like a demo and without me adding all these like extra things to visualize it better, we can just get rid of all of this, and we just need that one. We just need that that one line. These lines are in here just to make that the demo with the circle. Progress is set to, so that we actually haven't called that function yet. Let's just set that function up. Progress is 0 and time interval is yet to be determined because we'll set that at a later time. We have my timer forward function and my timer backward function. So it's just how we animate the transition in each direction. And so if the progress is 100, that means we got to 100%. We finish the transition, clear the interval. Otherwise, add on 1 to the progress of 0 to 1, 1 to 2, whatever. And each time call that transition function, that function we just looked up here, which has I as the number between 0 and 100, so the percentage progression. And then the opposite for the my terror backwards, clear if we get to 0, otherwise keep minus and 1 until we get to 0. I then add an event listener to this forwards button and also to the backwards button. You have to clear the timer first, otherwise you get some interesting behavior. And then you set the timer in the forward direction with my timer forward function, call on every 5 milliseconds. Otherwise, you clear the timer again if you're clicking backwards, and you do the opposite, my timer backwards, every 5 milliseconds. I also set up basically the exact same for this input element here. And instead of doing it on click event, you see these are, I did it on focus and on blur. And so focus is basically when you click in the box and it's in focus, and blur is when it becomes out of focus again. So it's the exact same. I just added a console log to say in and out of focus, just so we could see it here as I was testing, but we don't need that at all. So that's it. If I set this one back to 0, then we have the kind of full demo. You could also even, you could even set, I have this div here inside of the SVG using this foreign object tag. If I was to, for example, go to 240 in the Y here, you could actually, for example, overlap it. There's nothing saying that you can't do that here. So then you'd have a slightly different effect with 250. It's probably just touching it or something. Yeah, so you could have this kind of effect where maybe that's more relevant for your design or whatever. Because I've embedded normal HTML inside of an SVG here by using this foreign object tag. I also learned that there's a way to do this potentially with something called SMIL. I forgot what the acronym stands for now. But some kind of inbuilt animation to SVG. So I really enjoyed thinking about this, from real basics. How are the paths created? How are these curves created? What kind of string do we need to put in there? What kind of values do we need to change? How do we need to interpolate that from there to there? So I found that really interesting to work on and approach it like that. But potentially there's a way to do it without this kind of more manual or vanilla JavaScript approach, and maybe we can do it with some animation stuff, SMIL, built into SVG. So I'd never heard of it before, someone posted on one of my answers in Stack Overflow that I could use that. So maybe I'll give that a go in a future video. But I really like this kind of, you know, back to basics, or getting to know like kind of the workings of the problem and of the technology we're using. So I think I'll continue with a few more videos on that. So if you liked the video, if you want to see more, subscribe. I'm going to do my best to get out videos relatively often. Maybe try and keep them a bit shorter than this one. And yeah, you can also comment if you liked it, comment if you think we could do it better, and comment if you have any Stack Overflow questions on JavaScript, SVGs, D3GS that you'd like me to solve and to put onto this channel. Thanks a lot for listening, and see you soon.